podcast. So we have another podcast called Thursday Night's Actual Play, which is where we live broadcast and publish as an audio-only podcast us just playing our game. And we've decided to start this podcast to just do just more discussion about the game, discussion about what we've learned from playing, what I've learned from DMing, what the players learned, talk about what people have liked, the different experiments we've tried. I mean, almost never does a week go by that we don't try new things. So we will always have some insight into things we've tried. So today we have me, Greg, DM of Thursday Nights,
Eric, Damon,
Eric, and
Sam plays Hugh on Thursday nights.
Kaylin, player of Aurora, Super Dwarf.
And the four of us are just going to sit here and talk. So it being the first one, I think we'll just sort of... we intend this to be very sort of a free-form discussion. We'll come up with a couple topics, and then we'll take questions from our live audience towards the tail end of this. So we're starting here at 11:10, so I'll try to keep it somewhat structured, because we do want this to be somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes. I think we'll play it by ear to see what we like. So let's just throw out some ideas for what you... if there's anything that you guys want to discuss specifically about maybe recent things. It being our first podcast, any topic is really up for discussion. I mean, we could even talk about the very basics, how we got to how much role-playing we do. But I mean, just go around. I do want to talk about my change in how I'm doing treasure in Epic Tier.
Yeah, I put that there. I would love to address a significant amount of things to this session, so we can start the habit of talking about this session. I think one of the ideas that led to this, other than Greg and I talked about doing something a long time ago, was the fact that a lot of us just hang around after the session to talk about the session and talk about what's going on. And there's just been so many good and fun conversations from that we were kind of like, why don't we just record some of this stuff? Yeah. We're all here, we're all doing it. So
that's the intention. We want to make this podcast such that people who don't listen to the actual play can still follow what we're doing, get some insight into how to improve their own games and such. But we will also be talking about stuff that happened in our sessions. So we'll try to strike a balance between people that don't listen to the actual play and people that do. So you want to just kind of talk about the session. Sam, is there anything specific that you are interested in? I'm writing things down.
Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but I'm sure I'll come up with something in a minute here.
Do you want to look at the agenda? I have a couple topics things I wanted to mention. Do you want me to...
Still writing up here, sorry.
That's cool. Do you want me to, I have some things that I'm going to mention, but...
That's what I asked, is tell me the topics you want. I'm just going to pick, 2 of them.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's definitely worth calling to attention the amount of damage we did for the few amount of rounds we did. I mean, that's just... I mean, not just for Pump Up, but just in terms of kind of our group working together.
Yeah, just give me the topics and then we'll go back.
Vulnerable versus resist. That was a rule that we came up with. I had never even thought about. I think more use of complex terrain. And I want to talk about interacting with NPCs. Kind of in effect.
All right. You've basically given 3 podcasts worth of stuff. We'll see what we can get to. Some of those I like more than others. Keelan,
I second the NPC subject. I think that's a really interesting part of roleplay that can be overlooked.
So, first we're going to talk about the treasure thing. Mm-hmm. Kind of want to get your guys' feedback on it. So what I did this week, what I've kind of introduced to the group, I ran this across the Something Awful Dungeons and Dragons thread, and I had talked to Eric about it before, trying to get what people thought about it. And the idea I had was, here in Epic Tier, our players, they're basically kings and queens of their own nation. Their airship is their own nation. You guys are so powerful that it's become harder and harder for me as we went through Paragon Tier, because we're now in the beginning of Epic, to justify giving out magic treasure in the very traditional dungeon crawly way. The epitome of that was when you guys had faced Arath's champion, and when you looted his house, he had 3 sets of magical shoes. And it was so ridiculous.
The guy had a fabulous collection.
The guy had clearly a shoe collection. Because that's what
asshole of a violin.
Because we used the wish list system, so that was what made the most sense to give you guys, but it was just... It's so weird trying to fit it in flavorfully, how you are just, at your power level doing this. And now that you guys can teleport anywhere in all of the planes, and you've got this airship that can teleport, and you're so powerful that it doesn't really make sense to be killing a dude, and you're like, oh, look, he's got a ring that is more powerful than anything we have.
There's a reason why there's not a lot of pirates and treasure hunters around, and more people that work a 9-to-5 day job. Just in terms of resource distribution, it's about an economy more than it is about like trying to strike it rich and get lucky and rob from people.
So that's why I decided to try going with this new philosophy of how to do the treasure parcels.
We never rob.
Which is so the idea is that instead of giving out treasure, instead of giving out the items mainly and the gold, it is to take the value of the normal items that you would earn in the kind of theoretically game balanced treasure parcel system and just give you the full gold value, and it can be easily flavored as Thunderstrike, the nation, its successful trade routes, its da-da-da-da-da. We introduced it last week where you guys have a treasurer and he gives you reports of like, we've made 10 million gold, and you basically just get that money to spend however you see fit. It does a couple things. First of all, my intention is that, first of all, it will make you feel like that you guys are above dungeon crawling. You don't need to dungeon crawl anymore. If you really need to go into even maybe not an ancient dragon, but anything less than that, you could probably just send some Knights of Thunderstrike down there to go do it. You don't need to waste your own time with it. So it kind of does this whole thing that you're just kind of accumulating gold now. You're so rich that your money just makes money. And I hope that feels satisfying. The second is giving you the role-playing opportunity of crafting the world's most powerful items. And I think that is cool because amidst the vast resources, there are a lot of cool things that ways that you could flavor this stuff. You have different NPCs that do with it. And then finally, it also puts the onus of figuring out who should get the next big upgrade, who needs what to balance out the group on you guys.
Yeah.
It's previously been on me, and I had this complicated spreadsheet of who's got items most frequently and the total gold value of everyone's items. And really, you guys are far more
aware.
You guys are far more aware of what you have and what the group needs.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to remember, like, was it Sam who kept complaining about not hitting enough? Is he the one that's got a weapon that's 1+2 low? Or was that Brandis? Or was that Dan? Does Dan care? Does Dan rather want this? What would you want more?
Like,
you guys are far more aware of it. You're going to be able to do it. It's also going to make you excited to go through the items. My only concern, this is mainly what I want you to answer, is the whole kind of Diablo or World of Warcraft style, like, you kill a guy and you're crossing your fingers that maybe that ring of levitation that I really want is going to drop. Thing can be a fun anticipation, and certainly that's part of the game for some people. And I was concerned about if I mostly take that away, where you're just kind of getting the items you want by spending gold, does it remove some of the enjoyment, that anticipation of that sort of thing? And I have rambled on enough.
You set the stage.
So my first take on it is I kind of like the idea that we're accumulating funds from our massive trade and powerful resources that way, because it would kind of make sense. It wouldn't make sense not to be getting something from it at this level, flavor-wise and story-wise. But at the same time, I do kind of like the idea that maybe on the material plane, as we're running around, like, there's probably not a lot of dragon hordes that are probably worth a lot more. But I would still like it if there was something like we're in the realms of Kenya, and maybe not dropping like, oh, when he dropped the +5 sword you've been wanting. Maybe he drops like a treasure trove of stuff that's just, it's pretty significant. Maybe it's more than we would normally get. So, I don't know. I still like the idea of being able to get something, just because, you loot the Demon Lord's thing and get nothing of significance.
He was the guy that
So you really do like getting the loot from a big kill?
Not necessarily the specific item, though. It could just be... I still like the idea of having most of your stuff be crafted, where the things you're getting are not namely, oh yeah, and here's the sword you wanted. It's more of
valuable resources.
You get resources that you then use to craft the things you want. Because it is odd that you would find, and the next 30 treasure things are specifically tailored to your group.
Right.
That's too weird.
What about, I know Hugh is like a character, it's always like looking for like kind of ingenious solutions to problems, so would you be interested in like a smattering of things that aren't necessarily like super powerful, but things that might be used in like future encounters or future situations? Like, if we're innovative or creative enough, we can see that these things that were dropped can be used in this situation. So kind of like, it's almost like leaving behind a puzzle pieces for us to put together if we want, not crucial, but like could end up being kind of a little bit of a sub game type thing. Are you looking for that kind of thing? Like, because like the Dust of Disenchantment, kind of like your little tool. I see them along the lines as those kind of like puzzle pieces that we can try to plug in different places, but not necessarily things that like are crucial to our character's mechanics. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, or are you talking about like weapons?
Some of it's just satisfying to kill a guy and get some loot. It was an irritation that I personally had back in. You ever play Final Fantasy VIII?
Not that specific
No.
one.
No.
That's with
The loot
the
was
gun
done
blades and all
similar.
that?
You could go slaughter 1,000,000 enemies and you wouldn't get a single coin worth of something. You got like coin based of, and here's your allowance, and it shows up every so many like checkpoints in game. And that got a little bit, I don't know, just because it's like, well, I just slaughtered a million dudes.
Pay
It
me.
didn't have anything on them.
Yeah.
So you really do like the reward, the monetary reward of killing something. It doesn't need to have the items, but the valuable stuff. Oh, because you're in the elemental chaos and you killed, maybe not in this particular fight, but you killed some big prominent dude and he's got stuff. He's got these crazy rare things that only exist in the elemental chaos, and you can go back and turn it into things, and again, it gives you fodder for role-playing, crafting items.
Just because, I mean, loot, to some degree, it makes sense to the story for there to be something that he had, which you can then go and get money from. So maybe a balance between the two of like, and this is the money that you're pulling in from your trade deals, and this is the money that you're pulling in from that. But a lot of the tailored loot does kind of seem strange. Where it's like, and here's the stuff off your wish list that you wanted.
Fancy that.
You could just do, and here's a random magical item, which may be useful or maybe not, and then it's up to you guys to disenchant the thing and use the value to go make something you actually do want. Which is kind of fun as well. I don't know. Different styles.
My problem with the disenchant thing was always that they had it where it was only 1/5 value. Now it's 50% value for most items.
Yeah.
But it's still that, me being always thinking about the game balance and the design, you're getting shortchanged if you just enchant it because you're getting half the gold value. You're converting all your items into half the gold value of the items if you disenchant it all and buy your own. And that could, because the system is balanced, to require you to have the up-to-date magic armors and weapons. If you were to do that with every single item you got, you could get to a point where you're just not as powerful as the game balance is designed for you to have.
Yeah, so rather than that, just balance it like, and here's material. Go make stuff out of it. That's kind of like that idea.
I think crafting resources can be pretty amazing if you flavor it correctly, and if you apply it in a way that actually makes sense for maybe even specific items that you want to make later. Kind of hint at its usage. Something you mentioned about finding objects that aren't specifically on your wish list but are still kind of cool. I'm thinking of things like the Exodus knife and the basket of endless provisions and the gourd of water that we got.
Yeah, wondrous items are always kind of cool to get. It's just loot.
Are great for loot.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that because those are really memorable items that you've used. They're not really going to go on the wish list.
Isn't even an item.
Yeah, like no one's going to put basket of endless provisions because who tracks food in your things unless you got a specifically themed like apocalyptic thing. So, which we frankly do right now, but still, that is a really good point. That is actually something I'll consider because I hadn't thought of that.
Plus, it gives an avenue for you as well if you want to make items.
Yeah,
because wondrous items probably the easiest non-broken way just to add interesting things.
Yeah, because they're usually out of combat
adds flavor
things.
or like little puzzly type kind of like interactions.
That's a good point.
Yeah, the Exodus knife's one of my favorites.
For me, I'm a little bit of a different persuasion. I really don't care that much about ever getting drops. I'm always trying to. I enjoy the mechanical aspect of D&D. I really do. Greg always jokes about how much I'm on the character builder, but I really am always trying to cram as much like cool story stuff as I can into the session. So it leads a little bit into the NPC kind of conversation about how to get more story stuff involved. For me, I think to have like stories behind the items is a very cool thing. It's a fun thing. It's like classic D&D, and I want to be able to do more. Yeah. I think to have
artifacts and such and big prominent things, divine boons will still certainly be handed out when it's appropriate to the story. I should mention. Totally. I mean, there will still be things that are key parts of the plot that are items, quote unquote.
Absolutely.
And I'll probably set aside some of the parcel values.
And I think definitely everyone needs to be involved and have the DM still doing big item stories is great. But to have it's so many items and things to handle for the DM that like things kind of just get lost in the wash. And an item that will be very special to me is just another one of the many things that Greg has to distribute. So it's harder for you to be invested in a story. Whereas if I'm crafting something, I can really decide how I want it to come forth, and I can decide how I want it to kind of be used and described. And just like our powers come forth with a lot of flavor. I think that crafting our own items will allow us for our items to come forth with similar amount of story content. So
can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Since you seem like you have a really firm grasp of how you like to roleplay creation of items.
Yeah. Or arrival of items.
Well, yeah, the way that you get it. A feeling that I've had a concern about the new method of just kind of the items pop out of thin air in Thunderstrike. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you wanted us to roleplay that, but I'm not quite sure how we do that without really bogging down the time. So and so makes this, so and so makes this.
Can you stop doing that?
Oh, sorry. I know you're pointing at it.
So, like, how would you suggest kind of for a character to really feel like they are crafting that, but without absorbing so much gameplay?
Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that we have a 10-year arc now leaves gasps of breath in between important events, which I think is important to take into advantage. I know that's the thing. Over the 10-year time period, we had really important things going on, and even though we have a more important focus now, I think we're trying to put more breaths of kind of like downtime in between things. So hopefully that will give us time to roleplay and account for the other things we have going on in our lives, other relationships and responsibilities, and some of these other kind of like items that need to be made. I mean, a lot of the item upgrades haven't been like finds or kind of creations. Like, Damon's elemental sword is just kind of the story of it absorbing and coming into contact with new and more powerful elemental sources and kind of growing in that way. So
it's kind of a long-term thing too. It seems like it's doing that progressively. But what about something more like when I was talking about where we're getting parcels through Thunderstrike,
and you want to create something new?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could do something on the level of like a nation presents you a gift, like. We're like you're
so crafting is more of an abstraction.
Yeah, I mean crafting is totally.
Yeah, when I say crafting, I don't really mean it has to be enchanting it.
I was under the impression that we're like doing that. Okay.
No, it could be, or you could be some other story method of how you acquired it.
Acquisition is a great thing.
Yeah, Dermot and Aurora had their little like
I might steal that idea if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. It's, we had our little week-long adventure where we tracked something down. It turned out to be Hugh's armor. Damon was allergic to it. No one wanted to take it. And so there's a lot of ways for things that arrive at our doorstep. I mean, one of the most memorable kind of things that for when we got items was when it was a little kind of side adventure. We were coming back from the Critterage Mines the first time, and we got involved with that elven community. We killed a dragon. She gave us all kind of some boons. We didn't find we killed the dragon. We didn't find it at the dragon cage or cave. And like there was even like a little thing where like some elven kid shows up with a bow that like knocked him out of the sky, and that ended up being Damon's bow enchantment for a really long time. Mm-hmm. So like gifts, things that you kind of actually go to find. I mean, as we find new places, say the last thing real quick. Yeah. As we find new places, new ingredients become available. Like a lot of people haven't been to the chaos, even though Damon has. So Aurora might see the rock and be like, "Oh, I've never come in contact with this." That gives me a new idea. So,
And that does bring up is the last thing I want to say on this topic. But another way that you could flavor getting an item is certainly if you want to find an item after a fight, as long as you guys just deduct from the treasury in the background that, okay, I'm spending 10 million gold to get level 25 item. I already discussed with the group that you're going to get that. You could flavor it into getting it in the combat. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't, like the bow thing with the elf that Damon got. That made a cool story. And if you see an opportunity in combat or after combat, you're like, hey, this would actually be really awesome if this was a thing that is in the elemental chaos because of this reason. I got a really cool story. Just tell it, and now you have it. I don't mind. You can't do it in the middle of combat. You're like, well, this guy's vulnerable to radiant. Hey, look, I found a radiant sword. But in between combats, sure, I don't care. I mean, that we're really loosey goosey on. As long as it's between combats, if you completely respec your character, we don't really care. The point is to have fun and to keep it a balanced game. And you guys aren't abusing it where you're respecing your character for the types of monsters you're fighting. You're just making it stay fun. So, and that's fine. So yeah, when I say craft, yeah, you get it now. So it can be in any way.
As long as I get surprised every once in a while.
I just wanted to bring the whole thing. So the whole like receiving loot from monsters, I was thinking a little more on a kind of like a dungeon master's point of view. There's sort of this is the budget you guys are getting for your stuff.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't even have to be specific. Just like, okay, instead of getting, say it's 300K, instead of just getting 300K allowance like from your trade sources every month, you get 200K, and then you're going to get 100K from a monster you find.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah,
that's it.
And that's what you were saying. Is you want to get some of the gold from that, and I completely understand that.
Mechanically, it makes no difference. Just like this guy gave you that amount of money, so just so you get the story wise.
Yeah, so you get something. You get resources in both ways. And then the Wondrous Item thing was a really good point as well that I will definitely. I'll definitely keep.
They're so important, and you can even make up your own as long as you're good at balancing. I mean, who's to say even that a player can't come up with it? Yeah. Talk to the DM kind of out of a session and work on balancing it. It can be really cool.
Right. So let's move on to another topic. The one I think it looks most interesting for now, as Eric had mentioned, interacting with NPCs. Now that's a pretty damn general topic.
It was real general. I had something specific in mind.
Kalen also liked that idea, so why don't you go ahead and just kind of open it up with what you were thinking?
Yeah, it was a little bit related, kind of what I was talking about weapon stories. We have a lot of cool NPCs, and I know it was something that came to my attention a little bit when we had like a big NPC tournament, which was an awesome tournament. We have so many great stories out there and the great NPCs, and I oftentimes during the session, like, oh man, I want to interact with this NPC or do something with that or flesh it out, but just for continuity of story and just the time budget we're against, there's not a lot of time, and there's always going and writing something, which is fun. I need to do some more writing, and I have a lot of writing ideas, but I love to be able to talk it out and do things verbally, and I want sometimes to have blocks of time to kind of to flesh out NPC interactions or PC and PC interactions, and we used to do like a little group therapy before, which was fun. We could check in on each other, but it's a part of me like wants a certain amount of time to kind of cover like downtime interactions, and I don't want it to feel like it's super broken or super sad, but I mean, in my boundless hunger for increased depth and breadth of story, I just I want to find a way to interact more with NPCs, as feasible or not it is.
That is a fine thing to want. I completely encourage that.
I do too.
It puts a burden on me because man, there are so many NPCs, and you know that I'm terrible. Burden. I'm terrible with voices, and I'll forget.
No, you're great.
Better than any of us for sure. I don't even do a damn in voice.
All right, I've gotten better at my voices over the past 3 years,
voice was so good.
But so
the grill bile.
Is it that you don't feel that there's enough? You don't right now. You don't want to you don't want to waste, quote unquote, waste time. Kind of just doing a little interaction between Daemon and someone on the ship,
well,
or is it
one of two things.
You kind of feel like it would? Go ahead.
It could be one of two things. It could be that I don't have a good way of interjecting and saying like, "Hey, let's do a quick thing." Like I don't want to interrupt. Like people get into a flow and we're going, and I don't have a way of like holding up a red flag and being like, "Let's stop. I want to say something." Part of it is not knowing how to interrupt that well, and part of it is not wanting to interrupt too. Like we get into a flow, and I'm like, God, like I wanted to do a thing with Blackwood. Like Blackwood helped us out big time last session, and like Damon was gonna do something where he takes one of the guards off of Blackwood but leaves one guard, and I wanted to do a little thing, but there just wasn't time. We kind of had to move on. That's what I was gonna do, like back at the Thunderstrike ship. There wasn't a good break, so we moved on, and like I felt like the flow of the story was going in a certain direction, so I just didn't know how to get in there. So that was a specific example, but I want to be able to. Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know if it was like a good time to like identify like an NPC section, like a group therapy type thing to address some of those things. But like, I mean, I know it's not lost. I mean, in some ways, I feel like it's a little bit lost since like we have a session now in between that thing that I wanted to touch on. But like, I don't know. You can't do everything. I fully recognize you can't do everything. So.
It's funny, you're describing a problem that almost seems, I got to imagine that's the opposite issue that a lot of groups have, which is you're basically saying, we do too much role-playing, that you can't do even more role-playing.
That's all I'm saying. That's really all I'm saying. There's so much role playing that just gets in the way of other role playing.
Our main story arcs
that
are
really
so
is
engaging. You don't have enough time for all these side quests.
Come on!
it really is pretty much what you're saying.
Why
is
doesn't
that, like,
everyone have a 20-page backstory?
you're like,
That's
I don't
all
want
I'm
to
saying.
spend this time role playing because it's going to take away from this time role playing this other thing.
The only thing
is-
I'm proposing is there may be a way to structure it and recognize, like, hey, we need a certain amount of time on what's moving forward and a certain amount of time dedicated to kind of like what's happening kind of on a more macro setting. I don't know, and I don't have like a great specific idea.
I kind of get the feeling what he's saying, because there's sort of there's the role playing which is attached to the main quest. Here's us talking about how we're going to achieve this problem, how we're going to go up with that, and there's role playing like, okay, you guys are in for the evening.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes
Here's
we have
you
a
just
meal, we have a meal
chatting and-
together.
And I
whatever.
gotta tell you, there have been times where you've done a thing. You'll start doing a little side role playing thing, and part of me goes, "Oh crap! They're gonna spend like half an hour doing a cool thing, and my time budget for what point I want them to get to in the story is gonna have to be pulled back now. And now I gotta find a new good cliffhanger spot, and and it does have that
and
problem.
I don't.
And it's hardly a problem because it's more role playing, but.
I realized we have to get on too, and that's the thing. It was a conscious decision not to go for it. Like I was gonna say that Blackwood thing because I lost track of what you were doing. But then, like Greg was like, "Wait, hold on, she's right in the middle." I'm like, "Oh." So then I kind of clammed up, and then by the time we got going, I'm like, "Oh,
It's
we're
already
past
too
it.
late.
I'm not gonna force this.
Yeah.
Like let's go. We're going in a different direction."
I have a thought on that.
Part of it is
subject.
just a give and take, which is good,
I totally agree with you. I think that NPCs are so fun, and even if they're not super fleshed out, when you do talk to them, it's an opportunity to flesh them out. It happens, whether or not Greg wants to.
Well, it does.
It's gonna
No, I
happen.
want to flesh them out.
Yeah.
It's just-
So
it's stressful.
A thought that I have.
Stressful.
Well, that's what you
Aw.
should, and you do a really good job is you put the onus on the player to
So
make these NPCs real. But what my thought is if we really want to do that, if everyone kind of feels like that's a worthwhile goal, we should address it and formalize it in a way that gives you permission to kind of explore it.
One thing I can say, just a one-sentence interjection. Damon did a post that said you liked a lot. I did it a while back where I just went down and said Damon's relationship with every single NPC out. And it brought out some points that people weren't really aware of. And it could even be like that. Like on a weekly basis, I could just write one or two sentences like, I want Blackwood and Damon to do this, or I want whatever, Frida and blah 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 to have this conversation or something. I can just put down a couple of NBC things that I would like to see happen and just give it to you and see if you can work it in.
Well,
Or I don't know if that makes sense. But a lot of the ideas I have beforehand, so I don't know.
Happy Elf just said something in chat. You said, yeah, you guys should schedule in some downtime role playing, preferably towards the start and ends of the session. And
Downtime for the characters or downtime for...
well, it all of a sudden gave me the idea. What if we scheduled in at the beginning of the session, even if it's the middle of combat, right? Even if we had to split combat between beginning and end. What if we say, let's do some
rewind?
let's make sure we get like at least 5 minutes per person, or maybe even more, depending on what we feel like we need, and allow people to basically do a retroactive, like, here's a conversation that happened between Daemon and someone else, or Daemon and Aurora had this conversation. I mean, it could feel a little forced and broken.
It depends on how you
But
blend
it could be something also that the players can plan for during the week, which is, I mean, the best mechanical sessions that we have, I think, are when we have an idea, like the tower defense thing. We had a week, even though we didn't like spend hours on it. We had an idea of what was coming. It was kind of brewing in our mind. Then we come back and we're ready with ideas. Being able to have like a kind of we know this is going to be there for us to spend time on it. Because I love the improv amount of aspect of D&D, but sometimes it's just so you don't know what's going to happen. Like all of a sudden we're like in this ice place. It's impossible to prepare for, but like something like that, think about it. During
Well,
the
how
week.
would you feel if you had a period of time that was kind of like labeled like this is in the meantime, and
Meanwhile.
you
That's
have
what I mean.
meanwhile
Yeah,
meanwhile
like,
dot is what it is.
I
and
like it.
then during that time, and maybe there's a time limit. Maybe it's more. This is you have about this much time to kind of fiddle around, and you've come up with ideas during the week, and you maybe chat with people before the session starts and say, "This is what I'd like to do for meanwhile."
Yeah, I like the meanwhile.
I do like that as well, just because a lot of the downtime role playing is a lot of how the other aspects of the character get developed. I mean, in combat and
That's
in
where the
like
subtleties really come out.
like diplomatic things or in skill challenges. You get some
Solving
of it,
problems,
but a lot of
right?
it's solving problems, and that explores one aspect of your character. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that never
How
really
they
gets
solve
touched
problems,
on.
that's-
Is like how do they interact in non-stressful social situations?
Yeah, it was so bomb the other day when you're like, "What does Damon's room look like?" And I'm like, and
Yes!
Yeah.
normally you wouldn't I wouldn't get a chance necessarily to put that in there because that has nothing to do with solving the problems.
Yeah.
I was really glad to be able to throw a little bit of that in there, and a lot of that is in the writing, has been in the writing, but yeah.
And someone brings up an excellent point: is that movies and books and everything
Set
do
the stage,
exactly this all the time. They'll be in the middle of talking about something, and then it'll quickly tell a story of what an interaction was like to help set a scene. And we're frankly really good at the role playing part. We can make it work if we just make sure that
People know.
We just
people
have to
know
budget
it's an
the
option.
time, too.
People know it's an option that even in the middle of combat. I mean, I hate to suggest anything that makes combat take longer.
It's true.
So
Well, it
maybe
doesn't
I don't want to go
technically
that
make
far,
combat take
but
longer.
to
Just
basically
look
say,
at
Damon had a conversation with Victor just last week,
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
something, and then all of a sudden, not even just tell that as a story, but let's role play it, flash, and just have Damon said da 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 da, and then
Can I
I
bring up
respond, and it's a
something?
quick little scene.
That's cool because you don't have to say how they got there. All of a sudden, like, Damon and Victor are sitting outside the kitchen while blah blah blah, sense blah blah blah, wafts from like the oven. Damon comes out and blah blah blah, and then kind of like that. You can just set a whole stage, do it, and done. You're out.
If you really wanted to take that to the next level and really put the factors on the player to create more of the NPC, we could do something similar to what we did for the dream flashbacks for each character. We kind of had a little
Those are fun.
you remember the roleplay was kind of set
It was a lot
up
of
where
fun.
it's a character and the players are playing the NPCs for that moment.
Yeah.
yeah,
you
that's
have-
a bit
you
of
have
a,
to trust-
a larger.
It is, but you know, for a smaller thing, it's not going to be that big of a deal. It's not going to be a life-changing
I wouldn't write a
experience.
script for any of these things.
Right.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. Yeah, I
It
wouldn't.
would be much. It would be
Simpler.
What's the word I'm thinking of?
yeah, but if you wanted to set
Improv.
up, a quick
Something like
scene,
that,
something
though.
that takes 10 minutes, a really short thing,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like, hey, this is the thing that happened. I don't have to play all the characters that aren't Damon, especially if it's
Yeah.
Damon interacting with multiple people, or Damon wants to tell a story of something that happened on the Reductor,
Yeah.
his other ship. Maybe he's like, Sam, be this guy. He's kind of boisterous, and you just play it out real quick because you want to set the
Right.
scene. That's something we should consider doing more often.
Yeah,
And
I
we'll,
think it'll
we'll
help
definitely
people
think
with their
about that
stories as
in the
well.
meantime.
If you're worried about like time constraint things, you could say, okay, everybody's got like an RP coin, and anytime during the session, you can blow your 5-minute RP coin, and here's a scene for backstory or something. That's a little weird. It was an idea I had just a second ago.
Yeah.
There's merit to that. It's tough because you said if you feel there's a time constraint. We always feel
there's always a time
at
constraint.
every single moment of playing D&D.
Did.
Our biggest problem with D&D is that we can't be playing it all the time.
Well, we
That's a
save
huge problem. It's a disastrous problem.
we save so much
Calamity.
time with our sped up combat.
Although I gotta say,
mechanism.
Greg works half the time but twice as hard. For all like post-its and stuff.
I think that we
It's
can
involved.
spend the time that we've saved speeding up combat wisely, and I think using it in this way might be a really perfect way to
I think
to
it would
apply
be
it.
really enjoyable. I think it would set the stage a lot of times for
'Cause
some of the
NPCs
major
rule.
victories or bigger
They're
defeats.
awesome.
So yeah,
I mean, how cool is it that our NPCs are so intriguing that we want more time with them? I mean,
that's great.
I
I mean,
find
we
that
had
very-
that makes me
tournament.
feel really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had the huge tournament. It was.
I'm
totally
actually really
successful.
disappointed that this combat went as long as it did. I was hoping it would go 15 minutes shorter because the guy, man, I practiced the voice for this guy.
I know there
Well,
was
now
some
I get
definite
I get a whole week
he
to.
has some
Yeah.
idioms there.
He dropped it off. I mean, we have some awesome.
That's why I
Gisseri
forced it. That's why I forced it
minis.
to fast
I hope
forward a
you got
little
some-
bit to at least get his first sentence of dialogue because
That's always the best because then
because
it's
I'm
like,
excited.
ooh, who is this guy? What is he all?
it also makes a good cliffhanger. So let's we've gone for half an hour now. So let's.
Because we rule.
You said you had something specific, Kellen. You said you had something specific about NPCs that you did want to bring up. Did that get covered in what we talked about?
I think we probably covered it. Yeah.
Okay.
It sounds about right.
So as I said, we don't really know what length we want to go for with these podcasts. It's been
I wanna go for
it's
the
been half an
perfect-
hour, so I think we could go to questions. Give that a good.
If
15
you want to
About
shout
the
out,
session or
if you
in
want to shout out the
general?
vulnerable versus resist rule, if you want to put a little more just for people who are listening for extra stuff. I thought it was a good rule. It doesn't come up all the time, but I don't know.
It's just that they stack. They compete. So vulnerable 5 plus resist 10 equals resist 5.
Yeah, I think it's important to know.
Yeah. But so let's go to questions from the audience. And Mike asked a question. I haven't actually read it, but someone said that is.
How many people do we have on right now?
We've got hanging around afterwards. We've got 32 people.
Oh,
so
impressive, guys!
It's about we lost about 20 people.
We happy few.
So Mike says, all this talk of role-playing has raised a question for you, Greg. You have players with various levels of experience, not only with the game, but with role-playing in general. And a lot of groups have a hard time getting into the role-playing aspect of the game. So as a DM, how do you get the group to feel comfortable enough to role-play and not let people get overshadowed by other players? Well, I think
I love this question.
I think that you guys are probably more qualified to answer that than me. Not Eric, because he is the overshadower. So how about Sam?
That's why the mic's all the way over there.
Well, Kalen and Eric joined this group at the same time, back when 4th edition released. But Sam and Lincoln, who's not here, joined this group after we had already been playing for a full year. Lincoln was brand new to role-playing. Had never role-played at all before.
No.
Sam was a veteran role-player.
But I'd always done more with the mechanics.
But had not done a lot of as much flavor as we do in our group. So that was kind of new to you. Eric is a very loud and very kind of dominating presence at the table.
Extrovert.
If there's anyone that would be at risk of overshadowing other players, it would be Eric. So maybe you could elaborate on, has that been a problem for you? How was it like, especially when you were first starting getting into it? Or was it more of an encouragement? I mean, yeah, just...
Well, first of all, it helps if you're playing with a bunch of people who you actually are comfortable with and hanging out with. I think it would be a lot harder if you were not comfortable role-playing initially to go to one of the encounters groups with a bunch of people who you don't really know, and then just to jump into your character and start acting. Because unless you're a really big improv person, that seems like that could be a challenge. But I think, for me anyway, it's a matter of just getting to know your character well and coming up with sort of more backstory stuff and flavor for them. And eventually, once you kind of have an idea of your character and what the sort of person that they are, then role-playing becomes a little bit more easy because you think, okay, what would that character do? That's what I say he does. That's how he acts. And I've kind of admittedly come up with a character who's fairly low-key and...
I like him, though.
Yeah, I like Hugh. So, I mean, he doesn't do a whole lot of the, whatever stuff, and his mechanics are fairly martial. I could possibly do better. I've always had trouble figuring out, how do I translate 3 weapon damage into flavor? Is that 3 arrows, or is that a whole bunch of arrows, or whatever, all that kind of stuff?
You have a distinct personality. You've definitely carved a character, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe not as flamboyant as Brandis, but still very present.
I do want to address that Mike did ask, as a DM, how do I deal with it? And I've got to say, in my experience, I haven't really. We did some tricks early on. No, that's not true. So we did some early
I'd
on.
say the 5-minute thing.
I was about to bring that up. So early on in our playing, especially when Lincoln and Sam were introduced, we did a thing that we called we didn't used to call it group therapy, but it was we have a timer, an egg timer that's a 3-minute egg timer.
Go around.
And what we did was every once in a while, usually maybe twice per session, I would say, okay, what are your characters thinking?
Oh boy,
and we'd put the timer on for each person. Now the timer was not a time limit. It was actually a time requirement. It was 3 minutes, and it was basically you need to talk about what's going through your character's head. It was oftentimes before opening the door to possibly a big fight, or right after a big fight, or when any sort of thing that would normally be kind of emotionally impactful for humans or whatever entities, sentient beings in those situations. And so we'd go around from person to person, just around the table, saying, "What is your character thinking?" And it would be like, "Oh, this reminds him of the time he's a little anxious about this," and it did 2 major things. It helped everyone flesh out their characters because it forced them to think about what their character feels about this situation, and sometimes you'd have to make up something right there, and then that would become part of your character's past, and other people can bring it up later. So that really helped, and that
I would say that definitely helped me a lot, actually. Quite a bit.
Yeah, so I imagine that is a pretty good way.
That helped me develop Hugh, so then it was easier to roleplay him in future things. So I had stuff already developed to pull from.
And then Eric's loud, boisterous role-playing won't really interrupt it, because this is your turn. Time. You're talking about your character. This is not a conversation with Eric's character where there's that potential to kind of become intimidated by how much he's doing or how good he is at it, which can also be intimidating when one player is just so good at improvising that and you kind of feel like you're playing yourself and not your character. But those personal, just what is your character thinking, really helped a lot to get everyone talking. And then we also had that +1 bonus in combat.
If I may expand on that.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
I'll bring that up since we're talking. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Caitlin.
Well, I think this is a really important thing because a lot of people talk about how they don't roleplay enough in their sessions and they really want to get into it. And some people don't consider themselves role players in that way, and they're more about the mechanics and the combat. And what you were saying, or just about to say, which I will talk about, is the idea that you kind of have to give them an incentive, a real mechanical incentive sometimes. Some players are just more into what does it get me? What's the actual benefit? And when you give them a little bonus, it's kind of like a little carrot on a stick, saying, here, if you roleplay this hit even really well, you can have some more damage, or you can have a higher chance to hit next time. And that can be the little push that gets the ball rolling, where suddenly they have reason to. And what happens, and what happened for us, I think, was that it started happening so often that bonus was, started to kind of fade away, and it's almost like taking the training wheels off.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, what we did in our early play, in addition to the what's your character thinking around the table thing, it was also in combat. This was back when we had hidden monster defenses, which we do differently now, but we had in combat, we would do a thing where basically if you described your attack in a cinematic and cool way, I would provide an invisible +1 bonus to your attack. So basically, if you would normally miss the monster by 1, I'd call it a hit instead of a miss. And so what that did was it gave, especially power gamers who are really just in it for, because they want to deal damage, they want to hit. They're going to want to do it every time because anything that makes their character stronger, they're going to want to do. So they're forced to say, basically, if you say the words, I use enfeebling strike on the enemy, you don't get your bonus. But if you say he takes his hammer and he swings it around and the divine magic flows into the enemy and causes his attacks to weaken someone, boom, you get your invisible +1 bonus. You may have hit instead of missed. And I think that also worked. And as Kaylin mentioned, it just sort of phased away. We didn't need to do that anymore. Because
everyone got into the habit
of doing it anyway.
And then it would have just turned into power.
Well, and you realize it's so awesome that way.
So
you realize
I want to move on.
It's so cinematic.
I want to say one last thing.
We're spending too much time on each question.
That's fine.
We're just being thorough.
I just want to bring an example as well. That happened in Kevin's description of Arath's Academy, which made the Academy amazing. Because he said, if you make an incredibly awesome description, if you creep me out, I'll give you a little action point thing, which was going to give some bonus later on.
Except it was supposed to be a penalty later on. Tricky, Kevin.
I don't remember. Oh, it was something, but it was enough to, we made that place creepy as fuck.
We went for it.
Desperate.
All right, what was the last thing you wanted to say?
The only thing I was going to say is I think also, too, a DM can leave, breadcrumbs. After a couple sessions, you get an idea of what people like, be it things left on the battlefield or children to take care of, or Ren leaves, and you leave a scrap of paper with alphabet on it, and Ren's like, oh, something to read and study. Different characters love different things. If you walk into a bar and there's two guys who are arm wrestling, you better fucking believe Brandis is going to go over and start getting involved. If you leave a scenario that's just kind of set up for a person, that's going to invite them to get involved. So set them up, set up your characters, help them to talk about it.
That's true.
So we're going to go to the next question. I thought Happy Elf, someone from Happy Elf that I really liked. He said, I have a question. Do you guys think it has been worth putting your game on the web in audio and video terms? What do you feel you've gained from doing so? And that is an excellent question that I've almost surprisingly never even considered. I have thought about what other people have gained from watching us, particularly because
we have blessed you with our presence.
Yeah, by blessing everybody with the privilege to watch our game, we are bettering the world. But what have we gained from it?
Earth.
That's a damn good question, because I can honestly say we've gained a lot. I may have trouble articulating what it is we've gained.
Why don't you say what you got?
Well, I can certainly say that it does. I'm a very competitive person, someone who is definitely likes exhibition. In a competitive video game, I'm better if people are watching me than if people aren't, because that pressure to perform makes me perform better. Whereas some people, their nerves get shot and they do worse. I find myself I do better. I'll play better against humans than I play against bots because I'll try harder. For example, so I would say that there's been more pressure ever since we started broadcasting and recording for me to make the sessions even better, because I feel like I'm not just performing for the 5 of you, I'm performing for the thousands of people that download our podcast and the dozens of people that watch us live every week.
100,000 downloads.
1 billion downloads.
But that's a very personal thing, and that's not going to be the same for everybody. Some people could certainly run the risk of being very nervous and role-playing less because they're concerned that they're on camera. I've seen people tell us, I could not play D&D on camera. Some people are embarrassed at the entire concept of playing the game.
Try it for
so I always
a
think
year,
it's a shame.
and then
but and some people they feel like they would constantly think about the camera, which is a risk we ran in the beginning.
You asked everyone if they were willing to do it.
But other than that, that's that's a really damn hard question to answer.
I would say one of the big things is it adds a sense of legitimacy
to the game.
Just because, and sort of continuity to a degree, because it's a game of D&D, and one of the biggest things that happens to D&D groups is they fall apart. People quit coming, people stop going, all that kind of stuff. And so, if it's just, that's my Tuesday game, I can't make it, da-da-da. If it's a Tuesday night game and we're making podcasts and broadcasting, not showing up has a slightly bigger effect.
Because everyone will
miss you.
And and just the thing breaking up, not having a part anymore, it's kind of a bigger deal. Because it's like, then the website has to get shut down, and we no more podcasts and no more broadcasting. Yeah.
It's
a bigger, it adds more momentum to
So you're saying it pressures you into playing the game.
No, I'm saying it makes it so, I would come regardless. I'm not going to be the guy who quits. Unless, something dramatic happens or something. But...
Ooh. On camera.
No, it would. I think it helps keep the game coming, despite other people's challenges and stuff they have in life. Maybe it would be a little more difficult to come. People are like, let's keep going anyway, just because they're already at. So that's a certain aspect of it, and I think it does. Unrelated to that, it helps. Well, I don't know. Initially, it kind of made me want to play more. It maybe helps you want to speak more concisely and less rambling, but
less ums.
Sort of, but also being in the presence of other people does that too. I honestly, I would say, other than the occasional reminder, we're live, I forget we're actually broadcasting or being recorded. And that helps because I think if I focused on that too much, I would maybe get nervous. A little.
I know one thing that immediately popped into my head when asked this question is, we were just like every other group as far as tangents go. You could go on...
That's so true.
We stopped tangents almost immediately. It was a dramatic reduction.
Dude, I love Lincoln for so many reasons. He would always show up in D&D with 18 different stories from the week. And it's so fun to listen to the guy talk and joke with him. But then, we just get carried away a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I know I'm calling out
every
singly,
group
but,
does.
It wasn't bad. It was just, we ended up talking for, an hour into the time that we were planning on playing sometimes. But he loves the game just as much as any one of us, so,
I missed who you're talking about?
I was saying Lincoln, initially, he would come with so many stories from the week, and we just end up talking and, joking about so many things that we'd, go later and later just because talking about cool stories. But, like I said, he loves the game just as much as anyone else, so once we started having a recording go time, he was, we just got kind of down to it, and he started showing up early to talk about all those things.
Yeah. Well, we still do it. We just don't do it once people say that now everything's starting. Things start, and we generally are really good about it. And people make comments about it, and I was thinking, why is that? And I think it is because we are kind of beholden to this audience, this amorphous thing that watches us.
Yeah.
It's a production. We have a certain expectation that we're putting on ourselves. To make
Yeah,
it
and that
work.
actually
I have
brings
to
up
agree.
that reminds me of when we first started playing. We got a lot of comments from a lot of people when we first started broadcasting, specifically to me, of how good I was at keeping the
Grand DM.
at keeping the group on task. Because in the early days, you listen to those early podcasts, you'll hear me a lot of times saying, "Guys, get back on topic.
He's literally cracking
Let's
the
get
whip.
back here."
Well, not
And
literally,
cracking
but
the whip to get everyone to
certainly
get back on
cracking the
topic. Now, I was
Metaphorically.
noticing it today, because I think one time I said stay in character, that I almost never have to do that anymore. Almost never. And I would say that's just probably an evolution of us playing for a long time, really getting into it. We really, as you were saying in the earlier discussion, is that we don't have enough time to roleplay all the things we want, and I think going off topic just happens less often because people are more excited about role-playing the next thing. But in those early days, I would say that broadcasting was definitely a big factor for me cracking that whip, which was, I mean, I had done it before, but once we started recording, it was much more in the forefront of my mind that every time I went off topic, I was thinking, this is boring to listen to. And so I would say, this isn't what people want to listen to, and I do that. And even if it's kind of a weird thing, because I mean, board game night or role-playing night, it's also a social event that's supposed to be. So you don't want it to be, no one's allowed to joke around or have fun, of course.
Because we do joke.
But we do manage to stay on topic. And I would say that broadcasting has helped that because it made me feel more pressure to keep everyone on task.
It makes the game the thing rather than just hanging out.
Yes.
I will say
which helps with everything else.
that
the one quick thing.
Oh, sure.
Also, it does help on a weekly basis that when we have rules questions, when we're trying to figure out something, the chat, because there's a whole bunch of rules savvy people in chat,
that's true.
we'll pretty much always get an answer from chat earlier than I can look it up in the book, which actually does help us almost on a weekly basis, which is kind of nice. It's a small benefit, but it's a benefit. I wouldn't say people should set up a whole streaming thing just to get some
advice,
cruel rules lawyers,
hotline.
but it's help. So what were you going to say? And then I'll move on to last question.
For me, it's a couple of things. I really love posting on the forum during the week and like listening to or reading what people will post on the forum. But during the session, I've never had the computer in front of me. I haven't interacted a lot with the community, so I can't speak a lot to that. But I'll say definitely two things. For sure, the production level of kind of like the performing aspects of having an audience. I really try to pay more attention to my own kind of diction and pronunciation. As a baseline, I talk way too fast, and it's really hard to understand me. I listen to myself sometimes just for the hell of it on podcasts, kind of on Justin TV, and half the time I don't understand what I'm saying. So like
but
that,
you're gesturing
that's
so
just
much.
a reminder to
really.
me.
Give
I
us
know.
feedback on our forums if you have been able to understand anything Eric has said in this podcast.
Yeah, I know. If it's all gobbledygook, then you're probably average. So that's been motivation for me to kind of like work on that, which is ongoing. But the second thing, which hasn't been brought up, is I have a lot of friends who don't know anything about D&D and never play, and it started out being like a huge joke, and like then it was a joke that I played D&D so regularly, and then it was like I'm going online, sign in, and people were like, what? Like one by one they would all stop by, send texts, and then like after a couple more months it was like it just kind of started to become more of a regular thing. So if you guys have anyone who you're interested in just exposing the game to, just you put a camera on anything you're passionate about, and people will just start to accept it more. So it's an odd thing. It's an odd thing. I never felt bad about it. Like they're just razzing me, but it's funny that people kind of get online. And it's this funny thing that so many people that I know who have nothing to do with D&D have checked in on. Just like, hey, you're doing this thing. I'll come check you out. So
we're only going to do one more question because we're approaching our 1 hour mark here. I was saying 30 to 60 minutes. We're going to have trouble staying in 60. We could talk about this for hours, which means we'll be able to do this week after week. So, unfortunately, there are multiple questions that I wish we could get to.
Save your questions for next week.
Or we should start a forum on the under the podcast one says questions. You know,
maybe we could do that.
I like that.
This is an excellent one, especially for our first week because it's a nice and simple thing. Which is, what are your suggestions for getting friends into D&D? People who have never played before.
Ropes.
Now, it'd be nice if Lincoln were here because he was brand new to role playing altogether when we roped him in.
Peer pressure.
I don't have a good answer for that question. The worst thing about the overall design of any role-playing game, I can say this with confidence, every role-playing game, the worst part about the very genre is how hard it is to actually get to play it. You need a group of, usually, depending on the system, 3 or more players.
3 to 6,
they can meet on a regular basis, hopefully weekly, even if you're just trying to do monthly. They can meet up for hours, usually at least 3 hours or more, and just getting that on a regular basis is extremely difficult. A lot of our viewers watch us because they can't play. They don't have a group. They haven't been able to get friends to play. We get so many people coming in saying, man, I played this back in college, or I played this back in high school, but no one around me plays. And I'm overjoyed that we get to put something out there that at least gives people a little bit of that satisfaction. They can watch us play, they can listen to us play, and kind of play vicariously through us. I wish we would lose all our viewers because everyone went out and found a group and they were playing on Thursday night. That would be
ideal.
Joyous, because really my inspiration for starting this, besides being a self-centered person who wants everyone to watch him, even greater than that is wanting to spread D&D to more people and get more people interested in the game.
Yeah.
So, and Happy Up does mention you can play online. You can play online with Map Tool.
Yeah.
You
have.
Check. I have done it. Check Something Awful. Check if you are a part of a local gaming community, you can do that. But I kind of went way off tangent of the original question, which is how do you get your friends to play the game? I don't know.
I mean, honestly,
just tell them to fucking come over to your house, and you're going to teach them to play.
Beer and
just
pizza.
Get beer and pizza. And just start rolling dice. Don't start teaching them the rules. I would say that's going to scare people away. All the role-playing games, they have pretty complicated rules. Just start with the very idea that, like, the way I learned, I remember someone's like, this is how you play the game. Look, you roll this die, and if you get this number, you hit the guy. Just make up, if you're really having trouble getting people into it, make up your own rules as you go along. Get your friend to come over, get him to roll a die, and you're saying you're fighting a goblin, he rolls a die, you hit the goblin and you kill him, and then you do this thing. And if he's like, hey, this is actually kind of cool, then start teaching him the rules. Get into a real game. I mean, I've never actually done this, so I'm just kind of throwing darts here, but...
I mean,
you have done it.
So many people like rolling the dice is what's fun.
You introduced me to D&D. Like, I had never played before. It was at like one of these church overnight camp out things that we did.
Keep dice on you at all times.
We just, I mean...
Basically.
Look, I think what Greg says is great about kind of getting someone the idea of telling stories. There definitely are some indications of whether or not someone would be interested in the type of thing. It's a specific enough thing that there are definitely people that will surprise you that they're into it. But a lot of times, if a guy's like really into reading or fiction, sci-fi, some sort of kind of like story that is often kind of present in these type of things, you can just invite that guy to come do something like Greg says. And then, honestly, just hand him a book, too. That's the other thing I'd say. The books are really written well. They have a little bit of the lore in it. They have a little bit of kind of simpler rules. I mean, Wizards work so hard to, like, that's what they do professionally. Mm-hmm. So, like, rely on their materials a little bit, find, like, the simplest book, and just give it to them. Buy them as a gift. And if they're about it, they'll read through, and they're going to be like, fuck, I really want to play. Yeah. Like, they'll start making play happening, and they'll become maybe a watcher Thursday nights, and then find friends and start doing it,
I would say, if you like D&D, talk about it. Because sometimes it's just a matter of exposure. Because if your friends have never heard of D&D and they don't know what it is, and you never talk about it, they will never be interested in playing it, because they will never have actually heard of it.
Or they'll only know what the stigma is.
Yeah.
What people know about it, which is
because sometimes
totally backwards. And
people have heard weird things about it, and so there's like I used to play some games, or I'm into video games a little bit, but you don't talk about it because you're worried about being labeled as a nerd or something like that. But if you actually talk about it and you're enthusiastic about it, then you have to own it, essentially. Yeah. And so if you own it and you like it, and your friends realize that you are a normal, sane person, then maybe eventually, after hearing you talk about it enough times, they may be interested.
Yeah.
I have had the privilege of being able to talk about D&D to children who have never really worked
those are
with
awesome
it.
stories.
It's actually and the same methods that I use to talk about it can be used with adults. You know, you just obviously talk to them like adult.
Adults are D&D children.
They really are, and it's great. One thing is to know what the person is interested in. Some of the kids are really into the storytelling element. They want to make a character and just play that character. That's what they want to do. Others want to do amazing combat and kill monsters. So knowing what your friends are into with other games or what their hobbies are, approach it from that standpoint. If they're interested in combat, you can recount to them all the cool things you've done combat-wise, amazing things that your characters can do to take down monsters. If they're more into the stories, tell them the story. Say, wow, it was so amazing last night, this happened, and then this happened, and kind of tease them a little bit with that. And if they show interest, keep going. And they might even start asking, well, what happened this week? And then you can say, well, hey, if you ever want to come and watch, come and see what happens. Maybe you could even play an NPC. You know, it's a little bit, there's some seduction there. You don't, like, bury them in information immediately. Like you said, you'll scare them. You will scare them away. Just kind of, you know, invite them to dip their toe in the water and see where it goes from there.
So, we're definitely out of time. We're over an hour now. So, I'm going to...
We love you all. Play more D&D.
Cut it off here.
Thursday nights, so long-winded.
So, we definitely... we would love to get feedback on this new podcast we're doing. Go to Thursday Nights, that's with a K.com, and click on forums. That's the best way to give us feedback in the podcast section. Or you can just email us at podcast@thursdaynights.com. We'd love to know, is it too long? Is it too short?
Is it how you use
things? Yeah. You know, we haven't done a sort of discussion podcast, despite having 77 actual play podcasts under our belt. Wow, 77, that's a lot.
78.
A lot of podcasts.
You can say, too, I know we're trying to invite as many people as possible. If it seems like it's too many voices, just put that. We may keep them the same amount of people, but we want to know if it sounds like too many people are talking at the same time. I don't know.
I think we've been pretty good so far.
Yeah, anyway, any feedback, we'd love to hear it. And if you're interested in watching live play of Dungeons & Dragons, you can watch us every Thursday. You can become, just search for Thursday Nights on Twitter or Facebook, or go to thursdaynights.com. All of those have notifications of when we are online, which is every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, currently. Pacific Observed Time. And thanks for tuning in.
Night, guys.
Thank you, folks.
Night.
Thanks for watching.
The broadcast going, because
that's true.
Thank God, I'm about to pop.
Yay for P. I was thinking we could make a forum in the podcast forum, or a thread on the podcast forum for just like questions, because that's sort of one perk of having email readers is if you only have 30 people who are watching right now, then maybe we could potentially get more people to draw from, or like maybe just like people.
Well, I gotta tell you, with 30 people watching, are already more questions than we could answer.
That's true. But I don't know. Then we could maybe find really good questions or something.
I mean, I definitely get why you wanted the combat to move faster because of your awesome guys you wanted to do. However, I thought the combat moved pretty quick.
Oh, the combat moved very quick. I kind of fast forwarded the combat earlier than I normally would. It was both because, well, first of all, once the elite's gone, you guys have got one bloodied standard and two more standards, and you guys are just dominating the fight, especially because you were dominating it so much, it felt like it wasn't really a problem to get rid of it. I mean, we blow some dailies. But it was also because I knew we were going to be doing this, and I definitely didn't want to run too far over 11 p.m., because this is an experiment. We didn't want to start this at 11:45. And I didn't want to have to reconstruct combat at the beginning of next session for, like, 2 dudes.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I mean, it wouldn't have contributed to the lead-in to talking to these guys. They are. On that same note, we crushed that guy.
Yeah, that was such a worth of 2 dailies.
Yeah,
I was like, this is the moment.
Well, it was a shitload of damage. Also, I didn't think you'd need to say because he was at like, he was at.
I didn't know he was that damaged already. I just saw the 450 hit points.
He did a ton of damage. Also, someone brought up, his vulnerability is really weird because he has resist 15 all, right?
Uh-huh.
But then he has vulnerable 10 radiant. What that actually means is that if you do a radiant damage to him, he resists 5 of it because you add it together.
Yeah.
Resist 15 all plus vulnerable 10 radiant. Vulnerable 10 radiant. Mm-hmm. So
it just means that whenever you do radiant damage, you do 10 more. Isn't that how vulnerable works?
Yes, but he also resists 15 of it.
Yeah, so It does. Yeah. So it goes with the resist.
Were
I'm
the
agreeing
guys,
with you. It makes sense.
Were the other
Yeah.
guys vulnerable
So it's
to
tricky.
radiant?
So that when you were doing your extra radiant, it actually didn't do any more, theoretically.
But
Because-
it was extra damage though, because I had taken the initial resist off from the vulnerable 13 that I had applied to him, right?
Well, you see, you gave him.
Vulnerable 13.
He had
so
resist 15 all, and then vulnerable 13 all.
So it was just resist 2.
So resist 2, which
And
then
then
makes
do
him vulnerable,
vulnerability
and radiant
stack?
actually gives him vulnerable
I don't
8
think so.
radiant.
Yeah, that's what I
vulner-
was doing. I just took the 2 resist off of the initial
Well,
damage
resist
and then
stuff
added
stacks,
full
so
10
I
Yeah,
don't
upgrades.
yeah, it's really complicated.
Can
It
I
is
get
complicated.
Your
So-
post-it note things?
I had actually designed this fight to work in multiple
Yours
places
is
in this session.
behind
There were
you.
multiple
Cool.
places that combat could have happened. I decided to
That's
use the same monsters
cool.
mechanically.
Oh, it
So-
could have been the obelisk
I
on
did,
top or
this
something.
elite was not actually a Grell mechanically,
Oh yeah.
and I didn't even look at the page. Oftentimes I just pick the mechanics based on what I like and I'll skin it however I want. When I go to actually look at the page, look at this. The Cyrex Flesh Crafter, which is what he was.
Flesh crap.
He looks like a Grell!
Let me see.
He is totally
He's
good.
like a
It's like a
chain
super
Grell.
Grell.
It's a chain
He looks
Grell.
as much as a Grell as a Beholder Mini looks like a Grell.
He's a big, huge, like blobular brain thing with a bunch of
Tentacles.
It's
tentacles
on that.
that floats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Dude, I gotta say too,
Those triangles were amazing.
Yeah. Those were a good
I've
decision.
seen people suggest these. We need to graphics up some ones that have the mechanics pre-written out on them and like look all pretty, and then print them out, cut them out. We can do it for every zone. And,
So are we going to do a podcast breaking down
I'm kind of
the,
pumped on.
Do you want to do a
breakdown?
Thursday night's retrospective podcast discussing how?
So how did discussions work? How did retrospective go this week?
I'm sure there are podcasts out there all about creating
recursive
podcasts.
podcasts?
Recursive podcast.
Well, yeah, anything that
The
people will
recursive
want to know
retrospective.
more about. All right,
Of the retrospective.
I'm going to take us offline so we can start breaking down.
Thanks
I think that will
everyone
be
for
the
watching, and
crown
your
jewel
questions
moment
were
of-
The
great.
behind the scenes of the behind the scenes.
The crown jewel
Abiel
moment
says, "My
of
question
the
is,
Sever the
what is
Source.
the
I
font?
think they'll do better
Tell me everything
than
that's
crushing
in
someone's
that.
resist
Oh,
15
ha,
with
ha.
Sever the Source.
Yeah.
And then another. I set it up so our whole group
Oh,
can
the
get in
TV
on it.
just turned
So
off?
for you
Well-
to come in and to put double daily
guess
on it
that's
is
it.
exactly what I'm about. I'm
Yeah,
like,
I saw that. I was like, okay, this guy's resist 15. He's going to be really hard to kill. And it's going to take a while.
You're taking care of it.
You taking
Oh, yeah.
care of that initially was like, okay, time to pour in what we can because we may not get another chance later on.
Yeah, 'cause I sometimes have a hard time because people really commit